Flames of the First Age. John's people had learned to tame fire long ago, and it made survival immeasurably easier. They used its warmth for their hairless bodies, its heat to make meat tastier and richer in nutrition, and its light to hunt in the dark. They also used fire to preserve meat and cure animal hides to make their warmth giving cloths. They had not yet developed metallurgy, but they had mastered stone tools for hunting, building shelters, and even for war. War is something that forges a civilization. It forces groups to band together to become stronger. So they gathered in clans, and using their well developed vocal cords, they slowly formed a spoken language. John was the leader of the Rubion clan. Of course, their real names would be nearly impossible for a modern human to pronounce. He was 17 years old and 6 feet tall, fairly tall for his clan standards. The average lifespan of the members in his clan had been around 25, just a few generations ago. But some new discoveries of plants, which miraculously cured diseases and wounds, helped them live much longer. These days, up to around 35 years. His clan was relatively small, with just over 100 members and an army of 40 adult males. But John's intelligence and unconventional tactics made them formidable in battle. He knew that in every other clan, females were relegated to small jobs, like caring for children and preparing food, while the males hunted and made weapons. This left the males with little time to train for war. But John had noticed that while females were indeed slightly smaller than the males, their hunting instincts and intelligence were just as sharp. They also had the same free thumb, which would make them excellent weapon makers. John still remembered the day he became leader. He had defeated the previous chief, Peter, in a fair fight. Peter was old, almost 30 years. Their fight for leadership was done without weapons or cloths, just two males fighting barehanded for the right to lead. Until a few generations ago, there was no option for a leader to yield. You fought until death. Even in these modern days, if a leader did surrender, they would be cast out from the clan, left to die at the hands of rivals. But John did not maroon Peter. Instead, he made Peter his lieutenant. It was an act unheard of in their known world. Some of John's own clan members protested, but John insisted. Open quote, Peter held the longest term as leader in the Rubion clan's history, John declared. He has seen countless wars. To banish such a valuable member is foolishness. Close quote, he glared at the dissenters. Open quote, if anyone wishes to oppose the decision of their new leader, they can come and fight me. Close quote. That silenced everyone. John walked out of his cave on the hilltop and looked out at the entire valley bathed in the cool light of the moon. His territory was naturally protected by 7 hills surrounding it. The great white orb of the night, which waxed and waned, was a constant fascination for his clan. On the nights it went completely dark, they feared the light-giving orb was gone forever, only to feel relief when it reappeared in the sky the next day. They didn't understand why the other firefly-like dots in the sky didn't have the same light or size as the giant night orb. Nor did they know where all those tiny prickles of light went during the day when the sun, the brightest orb of all, reigned. They had not yet started believing in or worshiping a god. Their mathematics was in a primitive state, simple counting with some small addition and subtraction, yet they were trying desperately to find patterns in the moon's motion. John believed that if he could find a pattern in the heavenly bodies, he could apply that same logic to everything, including daily life. He had assigned 2 females and 1 male entirely to this task. He had 15 skilled worksmiths making weapons, a department Peter helped oversee. They used 4 types of materials. The most common were wood and bone. Then they had normal stone and a special black stone, which modern man would call obsidian. The Rubion clan believed this black stone fell to earth from the white orb in the sky. When the orb's side decreased, it was somehow cracking and falling to earth, only to later rejuvenate itself. So they called it sky stone. They used naturally sharp chips of sky stone to point the edges of wooden spears. They used specific rocks to chip bones into sharp daggers and spearheads. Skystone was the hardest to work with, and only 6 members of John's clan were masters of it. Then there were the soldiers. Their only concerns were training for battle and occasional hunting. Their pack hunting abilities predated their civilization by centuries. Initially, they were not the apex predators. Much larger creatures existed, and even their prey was often better defended and stronger than them. They were once on the brink of extinction. Yes, but the prospect of being both the hunted and the hunter had spurred the development of their brains. Once they started hunting together, they became the true apex predators of their world. It was true that even today, larger predators existed, some several times their size, and most of their prey weighed tons. They weren't built for sprinting, and their claws weren't as sharp as the competition's, but it was their wits that kept them at the top of the food chain. John, Peter called out from inside the cave. I want to show you something. John went inside. Peter was in a corner of the armory where he had been working for the entire day. In his hand was an obsidian dagger, but a tough, fibrous vine was skillfully attached to its hilt. Open quote, "What is this?" John asked. Close quote. Open quote, "I haven't named it," Peter explained, "but it's a new weapon I've developed. You know we've been using throwing spears and stones for a long time." Close quote. John nodded. Open quote, "But they have flaws. The force of our throw is often not enough to penetrate the thick hides of prey or enemies. Obsidian is sharp enough, but we can't just throw it away. It's too rare." Close quote. John nodded again. Open quote. "Here," Peter continued, "I attached the obsidian knife to this vine. I can throw it by swinging the vine, generating immense force. And the best part is, if I miss, I can pull on the vine to retrieve it. I don't lose the obsidian, and it effectively increases my range." Close quote. He gave a demonstration. He swung the weapon in a whistling arc and launched it at a thick log nearby. It struck with a sharp thwack, sinking deep into the wood and splitting it in half. With a firm tug, he retrieved the dagger. Open quote. "So what do you think?" the old warrior asked. Close quote. John stared at the weapon for a moment, then looked Peter in the eye and embraced him. Open quote. "Great work, Peter," Jan said. "Now everyone will know why I made you my lieutenant. We start training with this tomorrow. I feel a great war is coming for us." Close quote. Peter agreed. The next day, they introduced the new weapon to the clan. It brought a significant leap in their potential. Hunting became almost effortless. A month passed. One night, as John was looking out over his valley, he saw something in the far west where the moon was about to set. Smoke. His instincts screamed danger. It had to be another clan attempting an ambush. He knew the west held the Aquas clan and the Pearl clan. Since the Aquas were not as skilled in night fighting as the Pearl, he guessed it was the Pearl clan. He immediately gathered his army and his lieutenant. Open quote. "We have 40 soldiers," Jean briefed them. "I'm suggesting a reconnaissance party of 10, including Peter and me. The rest of the army will follow at a distance. They think they have the element of surprise, but in reality, we do. A lead party can scout ahead and report back. Then we can ambush them once they enter our territory. What do you say, Peter?" Close quote. It was unusual for a leader to ask his lieutenant's opinion. Open quote. "A good plan," Peter said, then paused. "I would add that we pick the best of our soldiers for the lead party. If they don't notice us with the new weapon, we may be able to finish them ourselves, avoiding bloodshed from our side." Close quote. Open quote. "Good," Jan said. Close quote. They selected their team, took their weapons, and started toward the west as the moon sank below the horizon. They didn't even think about lighting torches. Stealth was their primary weapon. As they moved past the small hills and trap pits they had dug along the creek, the smoke grew thicker. They hid within a pack of dense trees, their scents masked by mud they had applied to their bodies. They stood still, their breathing shallow. They could hear the marching sounds. John counted them as they neared, around 80 soldiers, armed with spears, daggers, and throwing stones. John knew they must take them by surprise. They were outnumbered 2-1, and he wanted to avoid spilling his soldiers' blood. He instructed his team to stay still, let them pass, and attack from behind. As soon as the last enemy soldier went by, John signaled the attack. 10 obsidian daggers on vines flew silently through the air. 10 soldiers at the rear of the column fell, blood gushing from their necks. Before the next 10 could even turn to see what the sound was, their throats were also slit. The third row turned and managed a choked gurgle before they too were silenced. John sounded his horn, and the next 10 soldiers fell, cutting the enemy force in half. Panic erupted. The remaining 40 soldiers circled in confusion before another 8 bodies fell. They broke and ran in random directions. The last man to flee was clearly their leader. Those who ran toward John's party were killed instantly. The others who ran deeper into the valley were met by John's main army. They immediately dropped their weapons, begging for mercy. As the army rounded up the 16 survivors, John emerged from the shadows. He noticed from their ornaments that 5 were from the Aquas clan and the rest from the Pearl. He decided to spare them for now. He wanted to know how these 2 clans had united to attack him. The next day, after the prisoners' wounds were treated, John began questioning them with Peter by his side. He learned that the Pearl and Aquas clans had indeed united, not by conquest, but to fight a common enemy, the Rubion clan. They knew John's ruthless and unconventional methods were making his clan far superior to the others. They had united for their own survival. John listened, then gave the prisoners an ultimatum. They could join the Rubion clan and pledge their loyalty, or they could remain as prisoners. They would be fed, but since they now knew the methods and weapons of the Rubion clan, they would never be allowed to leave. The prisoners looked at each other in disbelief. War prisoners were usually executed brutally, and here was John, offering them a new life. They all immediately agreed. Some of the Rubion clan members objected, but John silenced them with a look. He knew a bigger war was coming. There were 3 more clans surrounding them. If all of them united, it would be the end of the Rubion clan. And if John tried to talk peace, they would not be as generous as he had been. He wished he could just walk out alone toward those clans and solve the problems between them in peace. But he knew that as soon as he entered their territory, he would be immediately murdered, and without his leadership, his clan wouldn't survive. The only way forward was war. From that day, he began training everyone, children and females included, with weapons. He equipped everyone with at least a small dagger to be carried at all times. He posted lookouts atop the hills guarding the valley who could signal the approach of enemy troops. John also consulted daily with Peter and his expert weaponsmiths, discussing the possibility of new and better weapons. They developed a throwing fire, a stick coated with thick animal fat that could be lit and thrown with a vine, just like the daggers. Months passed. One night, as John looked at the sky, he noticed the great white orb was absent. He looked at the small pricks of light overhead. They were so numerous that his mathematical knowledge had no numbers high enough to count them all. He stared, wondering what they could be. Then he saw something. At first, he thought it was a hallucination, but then he realized it was real. One of the fireflies was moving. It was dim and hard to spot, but he was sure of it. He had seen moving pricks of light before, but it was a rare occurrence. He didn't know what it meant, but at that moment, a loud horn blast echoed through the valley, shattering the silence. The war. It had finally come. He felt the moving light was an omen, a bringer of war, a bringer of death. He signaled for all his members to assemble in the valley. The lookouts came running within minutes, relaying what they had seen. Hundreds of soldiers marching from 3 sides in unison. They weren't using torches, which meant they were already close. John commanded everyone to hide near the trees. He instructed the females and children to form a circle in the center of the valley, with the precious eggs at the very heart of their formation. He then instructed a group to ascend the hills and hide in a wider circle, fire sticks in hand, ready to throw them and fight their way into the valley when he called. Within minutes, his instructions were carried out. As he saw the shadows of soldiers cresting the hill, he glanced at the moving prick of light again. It was odd. Usually, these moving lights vanished within moments, but this one was still there, growing brighter, slowly moving. It felt like it was advancing alongside the coming army. John brushed the thought aside and focused on the battle. He had 3 circles of troops. The outermost line would let the enemy pass, then ambush them from behind. A second circle of his best fighters, including himself, would meet them head-on to protect the center. The inner circle of females and children, armed and capable, would kill anyone who got past his fighters. As the shapes came running down the hill, he sounded his horn. Fire sticks flew, illuminating the valley. He saw soldiers, 3 or 4 times the number of his entire clan. He horned again. Obsidian daggers flew, and the fight began. The enemy ranks were thrown into chaos. Screams echoed, blood splattered, flesh burned, and bodies were impaled. His own soldiers fell, but they took many enemies with them. Some invaders broke through to be met by a desperate wall of teeth and daggers from the females and children in the innermost circle. Though the surprise was on his side, and his flying daggers and fire sticks gave his army an edge, the sheer number of the enemy was overwhelming. He saw Peter fall nearby, taking 5 enemies with him. An enemy, set ablaze, ran screaming through the melee. The smell of blood was thick in the air. 4 enemies attacked John at once. He threw his dagger at one, kicked another, slashed the third with his own, and turned, whipping the fourth with his long tail before biting down with his powerful jaws. But at that moment, the sky itself caught fire. The entire valley stood still as the heavens illuminated as if 1,000 suns had risen at once. The moving star had become a giant, terrifying fireball. The next moment, it hit the earth a few kilometers from the valley. The ground shook violently. Seconds later, a blazing, superheated wind swept through the valley, instantly vaporizing everything. John couldn't even feel it. He was turned to ash in a fraction of a second. The entire world was set on fire, and then plunged into a massive winter by the ensuing dust and ash. 66 million years later, a newly civilized species who called themselves humans recovered the fossilized remains of John's species around the globe. They called John's kind Velociraptor and categorized them as dinosaurs, completely oblivious to the fact that they were walking on the ruins of a civilization much like their own, a civilization that would have developed the same technologies as modern humans if it hadn't been struck by that cataclysmic annihilation.